In this lesson, we're going to look at machine learning in more detail. In general, there are two broad categories of machine learning: supervised learning and unsupervised learning. In supervised learning, you start by training the machine learner by giving it a set of labeled examples. Now, there are two kind of broad categories of supervised learning. One of those is called classification, and the other is called prediction. So let's start with classification. In the case of classification, our labeled data might be, for example, the example that I give here is, suppose we're trying to train a machine learner to distinguish French text from English text. Then the training data would consist of texts along with a label which says whether it's in French or it's in English. And so we train our supervised learner using those labeled examples, and then we test the learner by giving it a text that doesn't have a label and asking it, is this an example of a French text or an English text? So that's classification. Another supervised learning task is prediction. In the case of prediction, we give the system a variety of examples of instances that are labeled with outcomes. So we say, here's an example. Let's see, I have an example here. For example, suppose you're trying to predict which students will be successful in college. The training data is a large group of students where you have both the pattern of grades in high school courses and an indication of whether they completed a college degree. So the trained predictor takes high school grades for a given student and then tries to predict whether that person will be successful when they go to college. That's an example of a supervised learner that does prediction rather than classification. Now, one of the problems with supervised learning is that you often require a lot of labeled data in order to train your learner. So an alternative is to train a learner on one set of data and then adapt that learner so that it can work with a much smaller set of training examples for a specialized class of examples. And we're going to see how to do that in our last part of the lesson on transfer learning. So that's supervised learning. The other category of machine learning is called unsupervised learning, and here the machine learner uses statistical properties of the inputs to try to group them into particular classes or categories. And we're going to see, that's called clustering, and we're going to see an example of unsupervised clustering at the beginning of the lesson.